6 o'clock in the morning, the Strait of Hormuz. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Cole carved through the dark water. This was not a routine transit through the vital maritime choke point. Overhead satellites had spotted Iranian anti-ship missile batteries moving into launch positions on the mainland just 4 hours earlier. The American crew did not know if they were sailing into a standard harassment patrol or a coordinated ambush. The morning air was thick with heavy humidity. Ahead, the 21-mile-wide channel looked like a black mirror under the fading stars. The destroyer moved steadily at 15 knots. It was a massive gray shadow against the sea. Its phased array radars scanned the horizon continuously. 20 miles away on Qeshm Island, heavy engines roared to life. Iranian fast attack craft slipped from their concrete moorings. They cut through the coastal shallows. 6:12 in the morning. Inside the Combat Information Center of the destroyer, the blue glow of tactical displays illuminated tense faces. The room was perfectly quiet except for the low hum of cooling fans. Commander Sarah Hayes stood directly behind the primary surface search radar operator. She watched tiny green contacts materialize on the digital map. The radar operator spoke clearly. Multiple small surface contacts. Bearing 045. Range 12,000 meters. Speed 40 knots and increasing. Hayes kept her eyes on the screen. Classify contacts. Sir. Profile matches Blader Runner-class speedboats. 5 distinct contacts. Formation is aggressive. This was the exact scenario intelligence had warned about. Iranian fast boats regularly shadowed American warships to project power. But today, the coastal shore batteries were actively tracking. The mainland radar signatures were hostile. A single miscalculation by a young speedboat pilot could trigger an automatic defensive response from the destroyer. That would ignite a fleet-wide engagement. Hayes picked up the internal communication handset. Her voice was steady. Condition 3. Set weapons posture to yellow. Manning stations. Do not lock fire control radars. I repeat, do not paint them with fire control. The crew moved with practiced precision. Watertight doors slammed shut. Damage control teams staged their gear. 6:15 in the morning. On the Iranian side, Captain Ali Reza gripped the metal console of the lead speedboat. The salt spray lashed his face through the open canopy. His small craft bounced violently over the light chop of the strait. He commanded a swarm of 5 heavily armed tactical boats. Each carried enough armor-piercing rockets and high explosives to severely damage an American hull. Reza keyed his tactical radio. Swarm leader to shore command. We have visual contact on the target. Closing to intercept distance. The shore base controller responded. Copy, leader. The target is isolated. Maintain pressure. Show them the borders are heavily defended. Do not fire unless fired upon. Reza adjusted his throttle. The twin engines screamed. The fast boats spread out into a wide crescent formation. They accelerated to 50 knots. The distance between the massive warship and the small attack craft shrank rapidly. On the bridge of the USS Cole, the officer of the deck raised his binoculars. The wake of the approaching boats looked like white scars on the dark water. The destroyer sounded its warning horn. 5 deep blasts echoed across the narrow strait. It was the international maritime signal for danger. The fast boats did not alter their course. They continued to close the gap. The sun began to crest over the jagged coastal mountains of the mainland. It painted the gray metal of the destroyer and the camouflaged hulls of the speedboats in harsh morning light. Neither commander had the political authority to start a war. Both had the weapons to finish one. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 6:20 in the morning. The distance between the vessels closed to 8,000 meters. Captain Ali Reza signaled his squadron. He raised his left hand and dropped it sharply. The 5 Iranian speedboats broke their wide crescent formation. They scattered into a chaotic and unpredictable swarm pattern. This was designed specifically to confuse automated tracking systems. The sea churned with white wakes, crisscrossing each other. Reza pushed his throttle forward. His boat surged to 55 knots. The USS Cole grew larger in his salt-stained windshield. It was a massive wall of gray steel. Inside the Combat Information Center of the destroyer, the radar picture became a mess of intersecting tracks. The primary surface search operator called out the change immediately. Contacts are employing swarm tactics, speed increasing to 55 knots, range 6,000 meters. Commander Sarah Hayes gripped the metal rail behind the operator console. She watched the green blips weave across the tactical screen. Track all targets manually. Do not lose the lead boat. Tracking manually. Lead contact is dead ahead. Hayes picked up the internal communication handset. Bridge. This is combat. Contacts are accelerating and weaving. Advise using acoustic warnings. 6:25 in the morning. On the bridge, the officer of the deck activated the long-range acoustic device. The sound cannon aimed directly at the approaching swarm. A deafening voice transmission blasted across the water in Farsi and English. Iranian naval vessels. This is a United States Navy warship. You are standing into danger. Alter your course immediately. 2 miles away, Reza felt the sound vibrate through the fiberglass hull of his boat. He gripped the heavy machine gun mount in front of him. The weapon was loaded with armor-piercing rounds. Beside it sat a twin rocket pod. His men were deeply disciplined. No one touched the triggers. He keyed his tactical radio. Swarm leader to all units. Fall into line astern. We will run the gauntlet. Cross their bow at 1,000 meters. The shore base controller broke over the net. Copy, leader. Radar systems on the mainland are tracking the target. You have overwatch. Reza smiled tightly. He knew the Americans were listening to that transmission. The mainland missile batteries were the real threat. His boats were just the bait to force a mistake. The 5 fast boats snapped out of their chaotic weave. They formed a perfectly straight line behind Reza. They shot across the water like a spear aimed directly at the path of the destroyer. 6:28 in the morning. Aboard the USS Cole, the defensive response was immediate. The starboard side 50 caliber machine gun crews tracked the approaching line. The gunners wore heavy body armor and ballistic helmets. Their hands rested lightly on the spade grips of their weapons. They waited for the order to chamber around. They did not move. Inside the combat center, the electronic warfare officer spoke up. His voice was sharp. "Ma'am, shore batteries are painting us. Early warning radars from the mainland are sweeping our superstructure. They are definitely watching the engagement." Commander Hayes stepped closer to the primary display. Understood. They want us to shoot the boat so the shore batteries have an excuse to fire. Do not give them the excuse. 6:30 in the morning. The distance dropped to 3,000 meters. The wake of the destroyer rolled heavily in the narrow channel. The fast boats hit the outer edge of that wake and launched into the air. They slammed back down violently into the sea. They did not slow down. The lead boat was now clearly visible from the bridge without binoculars. It was a dark and low profile against the gray water. The twin rocket tubes pointed aggressively forward. Target is at 2,000 meters, the radar operator announced. Still closing. Speed is 50 knots. Hayes picked up the ship-wide announcing system. All hands brace for shock. We may take a hit. The heavy steel doors of the combat center were sealed tight. The crew braced their boots against the deck. The gap was closing much too fast. 6:35 in the morning. The lead speedboat cut across the path of the destroyer. The distance was exactly 1,000 meters. To a civilian, a kilometer seems far. On the water at 50 knots, it was practically a knife fight. The USS Cole displaced nearly 9,000 tons of water. Its bow wave was a massive wall of rolling kinetic energy. Captain Ali Reza hit that wave at full throttle. The fiberglass hull of his attack craft launched out of the water. The twin propellers screamed in the empty air. The boat crashed down violently. Salt water flooded the open deck. His gunner gripped the metal rail to keep from being thrown overboard. Reza did not flinch. He angled his rudder hard to port. The 4 remaining boats followed his exact path. They sliced across the American bow one by one. It was a flawless display of aggressive seamanship. It was also incredibly reckless. 6:38 in the morning. Inside the Combat Information Center of the destroyer, alarms chimed constantly. Commander Sarah Hayes watched the digital tracks cross her screen. She kept her voice flat. Distance on the closest pass. The radar operator answered immediately. 950 meters, sir. They are regrouping on our port side. The electronic warfare officer called out, "Mainland shore batteries are still painting us. They have increased their sweep rate. They are searching for a fire control radar emission from our ship." Hayes looked at the tactical display. The rules of engagement were perfectly clear. She had the inherent right of self-defense. If the boat showed absolute hostile intent, she could destroy them. But hostile intent was a dangerous gray area. Crossing the bow was aggressive. It was not a weapon launch. If she fired the 50 caliber machine guns, the mainland missile batteries would launch heavy anti-ship weapons. The USS Cole would have to activate its Aegis combat system. Standard missiles would fill the sky. The strait would become a graveyard of burning metal. "Maintain current weapons posture," Hayes said. "Keep the acoustic warnings going. Tell the bridge to hold course and speed. We will not be bullied out of the shipping lane." 6:42 in the morning. The 5 Iranian boats reformed their line. Captain Reza checked his tactical radio. The encrypted channel clicked open. The shore base controller sounded tense. "Swarm leader." The target did not deviate. "Mainland radar confirms the American warship is holding its course." Reza wiped salt spray from his eyes. "Understood. Their crew is disciplined. We will have to push harder." "Copy, leader. You are authorized to close the distance. Bring them to the breaking point. Do not initiate kinetic fire." Reza looked at his heavy machine gunner. The young man nodded. Reza pushed the dual throttles forward again. The engines roared. The swarm pivoted sharply. They aimed directly at the port side of the huge destroyer. This was not a bow crossing. This was a broadside run. 6:45 in the morning. On the port side of the USS Cole, the machine gun crews saw the boats turning inward. The gunner in Mount 2 leaned heavily into his weapon. He aligned his iron sights with the lead speedboat. The target was growing larger every single second. On the bridge, the officer of the deck gripped the radio handset. "Combat. This is the bridge. The swarm is inbound on our port beam. They are extremely aggressive." Commander Hayes answered from the darkened combat center. "Understood. Weapons free only on my direct order. I repeat, do not fire." The distance dropped to 800 meters, then 600. The noise of the fast boats was now a high-pitched whine cutting through the humid morning air. The sun was fully above the horizon. The harsh light reflected off the loaded rocket pods of the approaching craft. Every American sailor on the port weather deck knew what would happen if those rockets launched. There was zero margin for error remaining. The invisible line between posturing and war was vanishing. 6:48 in the morning. The swarm of 5 Iranian speedboats leveled out parallel to the USS Cole. The distance was exactly 600 meters. The twin outboard engines of the fast craft screamed over the crash of the ocean. On the port bridge wing, the American lookouts stared down the barrels of heavy rocket pods. The electronic warfare officer in the combat center spoke loudly. "Ma'am, multiple laser rangefinders detected. They are painting our portside superstructure. They are dialing in firing solutions for their unguided rockets." Commander Sarah Hayes stared at the main tactical screen. "Copy. Are the mainland shore batteries still active?" "Affirmative. They are locked on our position. They are waiting for us to create a radar spike." Hayes picked up the bridge handset. "Bridge. Combat. Maintain course. Do not vary speed by a single knot. Give them nothing to misinterpret." 6:50 in the morning. Captain Ali Reza held his boat steady. The massive gray wall of the American destroyer dominated his field of vision. His weapons officer kept the laser target designator fixed on the bridge wing of the warship. Reza keyed his radio. "Swarm leader to base. We have firing solutions locked. The target is not altering course. They are not activating fire control radars." The shore controller answered immediately. "Maintain pressure. Close to 400 meters. Force them to defend themselves." Reza hesitated for a fraction of a second. 400 meters was practically a collision course for unguided rockets. The backblast alone could destabilize his small boats in the heavy wake. "Copy base. Closing to 400. Reza pushed the throttle. The 5 boats surged inward again. The gap shrank rapidly. The water churning between the vessels became violently chaotic. 6:51 in the morning. On the port weather deck of the destroyer, the machine gunner in Mount 2 tightened his grip. The Iranian boats were so close, he could see the faces of their crews. He could see the dark visor of the swarm leader. The sheer noise of the Iranian engines was deafening. The gunner spoke into his headset. Mount 2 to combat. Target is inside 500 meters. I have a clean shot on the lead vessel. Requesting weapons free. Inside the combat center, the room was dead silent. Every operator waited for the captain to speak. Hayes looked at the digital track. If she gave the order, 5 boats would be shredded in seconds. Then the mainland missiles would launch. 200 American sailors would be at extreme risk of a catastrophic hull breach. Hayes keyed the ship-wide net. This is the captain. Weapons hold. I repeat, weapons hold. Nobody pulls a trigger. Let them push. We will hold the line. 6:52 in the morning. The distance held at 400 meters. The 5 Iranian speedboats matched the 15-knot pace of the destroyer perfectly. They were locked in a high-speed standoff. On the bridge of the USS Cole, the laser warning receivers wailed continuously. The high-pitched tone meant hostile weapons were actively targeted and ready to fire. The officer of the deck gripped the heavy bridge console. He watched the rocket pods tracking their movement. One nervous twitch on an Iranian trigger would unleash high explosives into the thin steel of the upper decks. The destroyer continued its slow and steady path through the narrow channel. The sun beat down on the metal plates. The heat index was rising rapidly. The physical and mental strain on both crews was reaching a critical threshold. The standoff could not last much longer. The breaking point was coming. 6:55 in the morning. Aboard the USS Cole, the flight deck was a storm of noise and rushing wind. The rotors of an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter spun up to maximum speed. Commander Sarah Hayes had authorized the emergency launch 2 minutes earlier. She needed an eye in the sky. She needed an armed platform that could shoot down the fast boats before they closed the final distance. The flight deck officer raised his green wand. The heavy helicopter lifted abruptly off the steel deck. It banked sharply to port. The powerful downwash blasted the surface of the water. The aircraft carried 4 Hellfire missiles and a heavy door-mounted machine gun. Inside the combat center, the tactical screen updated immediately. The helicopter data link fed real-time thermal imagery directly to the primary display. The 5 Iranian speedboats appeared as glowing white darts on the dark water. Hayes watched the live feed. She spoke into the command net. Get Guardian 1 up to 500 feet. Keep them directly over the ship. I want those boats painted with our airborne targeting lasers. Let them know we see everything. 6:56 in the morning. 20 miles away on the mainland, Iranian radar operators sat inside a hardened concrete bunker. They watched their screens intently. The massive coastal radar arrays pivoted physically to track the new airborne contact. The launch of the American helicopter changed the tactical geometry of the entire strait. It was a severe escalation. The shore-based controller keyed his heavy radio handset. Swarm leader. Mainland radar detects airborne contact launching from the target. They are deploying an attack helicopter. Firing solutions on the mainland are advancing to maximum readiness. Captain Ali Reza heard the transmission through the heavy static of his earpiece. He tilted his head back. Through the salt-stained canopy of his speedboat, he saw the dark shape of the Seahawk hovering above the destroyer. The downdraft whipped the sea into a chaotic froth directly ahead of his path. 6:57 in the morning. Reza held his course at exactly 400 meters. The physical vibration of the twin engines rattled his teeth. His hands were slick with sweat on the metal steering wheel. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of his control. He was deployed to harass the destroyer and test their resolve. Now he was staring down an armed gunship with thermal optics. He pressed his throat microphone. Base. This is Swarm Leader. The airborne contact has us targeted. I can see their laser designators. Requesting updated orders. Do we hold the line or break off? The answer from the mainland was immediate and cold. Hold the line. We are locking the primary mainland coastal batteries now. If the helicopter fires a single round, we will sink the destroyer. 6:58 in the morning. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Cole, a sharp tone pierced the darkened room. It was not a standard warning chime. It was a continuous and high-pitched electronic scream. The electronic warfare officer shouted over the noise. "Ma'am, mainland coastal radars have shifted modes. They are no longer searching. We have a hard lock from shore-based anti-ship missiles. They have a continuous fire control solution." Hayes gripped the metal rail tightly. The entire dynamic of the engagement had just flipped. A hard targeting lock was a legally hostile act under naval rules of engagement. The USS Cole was now fully authorized to defend itself with lethal force. Above them on the weather decks, the automated phalanx close-in weapon systems spun up. The heavy radar-guided Gatling guns searched for incoming missiles. The tactical action officer looked directly at Hayes. "Captain, we have an active missile lock from the mainland. The fast boats are at 400 meters with rockets armed. We are inside the threat envelope for a coordinated strike. I need weapons free." Hayes stared at the blue tactical screen. The green tracks were converging on their exact position. The air in the room felt incredibly thin. The United States Navy was seconds away from starting a major conflict in the world's most critical shipping lane. She picked up the command handset. Her voice was perfectly calm. "Stand by to execute." 7 o'clock in the morning. The digital clock rolled over. The combat center was completely silent. The high-pitched tone of the missile lock screamed continuously. Commander Sarah Hayes held the command handset. Her knuckles were white. Her finger rested firmly on the transmit key. The tactical screen showed 5 glowing green tracks. They were holding at exactly 400 meters. They were inside the absolute kill zone. The mainland missiles were ready to launch. On the exterior weather decks, the American close-in weapon systems spun up. The heavy white domes of the phalanx turrets tracked the targets autonomously. The 6-barrel Gatling guns whirred loudly. They scanned the horizon. They searched for an incoming sea-skimming threat. They waited for the master arm switch. The ship vibrated with restrained power. 7 o'clock and 30 seconds in the morning. Captain Ali Reza made his choice. The tension was completely unbearable. The high-speed standoff had to break. He pushed his dual throttles to absolute maximum. His twin engines roared. Black smoke poured from the exhausts. His speedboat surged violently ahead. It broke the disciplined line of the swarm. He turned his steering wheel hard to starboard. The small craft banked sharply. It aimed directly at the center of the American destroyer. The water ripped past his fiberglass hull. 300 meters. 250. His heavy machine gunner shouted something in fear. The wind tore the words away. The target was a solid wall of gray steel. The laser warning receivers on his console blared. The American helicopter had him locked. 7:01 in the morning. The primary radar operator shouted loudly. "Lead boat braking formation. Inbound on our port beam. Direct collision course. Speed 60 knots." Hayes did not blink. The tactical picture was absolutely clear. The rules of engagement were perfectly defined. A high-speed ramming attempt was a lethal attack. She raised the handset to her mouth. Target, lead boat. Track with mount 2. Stand by to fire. On the port weather deck, the gunner tightened his grip. Sweat poured down his face under his ballistic helmet. The heavy .50 caliber weapon was loaded with armor-piercing incendiary rounds. He flipped the mechanical safety off. He aligned his iron sights. The fast boat filled his entire field of view. He could see the white wake exploding from the aggressive bow. He could see the dark visor of the Iranian commander. His thumbs rested heavily on the butterfly trigger. He waited for the final word from the dark combat center. 200 meters. The distance was vanishing rapidly. 7, 0, 1, and 30 seconds in the morning. The Iranian shore controller screamed over the encrypted radio network. "Swarm leader, abort. You are unauthorized. Abort your run." Reza ignored the desperate transmission. His eyes were wide. The gray steel hull was a massive mountain of metal, 150 meters. He braced for the kinetic impact. He braced for the American heavy machine gun fire to shred his boat. High above him, the American Seahawk helicopter dropped its nose sharply. The airborne door gunner chambered a heavy round. The Hellfire missile seeker acquired the hot engine block of the speedboat. 20 miles away, the mainland shore batteries reached maximum firing voltage. Inside the dark combat center of the destroyer, Commander Hayes took a final breath. The window for a non-lethal resolution was completely gone. She opened her mouth. She prepared to give the final kill order. The entire strait held its breath. History balanced on a single spoken word. Then, 7:03 in the morning, Commander Sarah Hayes opened her mouth to give the kill order. A different alarm blared across the bridge and the combat center. It was the automatic identification system. It screamed a high-priority collision warning. The primary radar operator shouted loudly, "Emergency. Massive surface contact bearing 350. Range 1,000 meters. A civilian supertanker has suffered a steering casualty. It is swinging completely out of the commercial transit lane." A 300-meter-long floating wall of steel was suddenly turning sideways in the narrow strait. The massive ship carried 2 million barrels of crude oil. It had lost rudder control. The heavy current of the channel caught its huge hull. It drifted directly between the USS Cole and the incoming Iranian swarm. Hayes immediately dropped the fire command. If her machine guns missed the small boats, armor-piercing incendiary rounds would hit the oil tanker. If the mainland missiles fired, they would lock onto the massive radar cross-section of the civilian ship. A hit would cause an environmental and human catastrophe. It would close the Strait of Hormuz for years. "Weapons hold," Hayes ordered. "All stations weapons hold. Bridge, this is combat. Take evasive action. Get us clear of that tanker." 7:04 in the morning. Captain Ali Reza saw the black wall of the supertanker emerging from the morning haze. He was 150 meters from the American destroyer. He was completely committed to the high-speed attack run. Suddenly, the sea ahead of him churned into a violent whirlpool. The massive propellers of the drifting tanker threw thousands of gallons of water into the air. The civilian crew was desperately trying to reverse their engines. The towering wall of steel was swinging directly into his path. Reza had seconds to react. He could no longer see the American warship. The gray target was completely eclipsed by the civilian vessel. He grabbed his tactical radio. "Abort! All swarm units aboard! Brake starboard! Hard starboard!" Reza threw his entire body weight into the steering wheel. The fiberglass hull of his fast attack boat skipped violently over the turbulent wake. His starboard engine whined loudly as it cavitated in the churned water. The black bow of the oil tanker passed less than 40 meters from his head. The shadow of the massive ship completely swallowed his small boat. 7:05 in the morning. High above the chaos, the pilot of the American Seahawk helicopter watched the geometry of the strait collapse. Guardian 1 banked hard to stay clear of the civilian masts. The pilot keyed his radio. "Combat. Guardian 1. The civilian tanker is completely adrift. They are caught in the cross-current. The Iranian swarm is scattering toward the coastal shoals to avoid getting crushed." 20 miles away on the mainland, the Iranian shore-based controller stared at his screens in disbelief. The clean targeting solution on the American destroyer shattered. The radar return blossomed into a massive and disorganized blob. The coastal missile batteries lost their specific lock. The automated systems could not distinguish the warship from the massive civilian tanker that had just crossed the line of sight. "Swarm leader," the controller broadcast over the encrypted net. "We have lost radar lock. The civilian ship is blocking the target. Report your status immediately." There was only heavy static on the radio network. On the bridge of the USS Cole, the officer of the deck screamed orders to the helm. "All engines back full. Rudder hard to starboard." The massive gas turbine engines of the destroyer roared as they reversed thrust. The steel deck shuddered violently under the extreme strain. 9,000 tons of warship fought its own forward momentum. The gray bow of the destroyer swung slowly away from the encroaching oil tanker. The immediate threat of war vanished. The immediate threat of a catastrophic maritime collision took its place. The strait was too narrow. There was simply no room for 3 vessels of this size to maneuver safely at high speed. The physics of the ocean took complete control of the situation. The morning air filled with the deafening sound of grinding water and screaming engines. The sea boiled white. 7:08 in the morning. The USS Cole shuddered violently. 9,000 tons of steel fought against its own forward momentum. The massive gas turbine engine screamed in full reverse. On the bridge, Commander Sarah Hayes watched the black hull of the civilian supertanker fill the forward windows. The distance was closing, but the rate of closure was finally dropping. The officer of the deck gripped the console. Speed is dropping, passing 10 knots. We are clearing the collision zone. Barely. Hayes did not relax her grip on the command handset. The immediate threat of the fast boats was over. The threat of a catastrophic maritime accident was peaking. Inside the combat center, the primary radar operator called out the new tactical picture. "Ma'am, we have lost the fast boats on surface search. They are completely masked by the tanker. Mainland missile locks have dropped. The coastal radars cannot paint us through the massive civilian ship." 7:10 in the morning. On the other side of the floating steel wall, Captain Ali Reza fought to control his boat. The wake from the drifting tanker was a chaotic mess of deep troughs and white foam. His small fiberglass craft slammed down hard. Salt water flooded the deck. His gunner was on his knees. He gripped the weapon mount to keep from washing overboard. Reza keyed his tactical radio. "Swarm leader to all units, sound off." One by one, his 4 wingmen reported in. They were battered but afloat. They had scattered toward the shallow coastal waters to avoid being crushed by the massive propellers of the tanker. The shore base controller broke through the heavy static. "Swarm leader, this is base. We have lost all targeting telemetry. The civilian vessel is blocking the radar horizon. Do you have a visual on the target?" Reza looked up at the sheer vertical cliff of the supertanker. It towered over them. Negative base. The target is entirely obscured. "We are fighting the wake. The attack run is broken. Copy leader. Do not attempt to re-engage. Pull back to safe water." 7:13 in the morning. High above the strait, Guardian 1 circled the chaotic scene. The Seahawk helicopter pilot watched the 3 vessels on his thermal display. The geometry of the waterway was completely ruined. The pilot spoke into his radio. "Combat. This is Guardian 1. The Iranian swarm is retreating toward Keshem Island. They are not reforming for another run. The supertanker is slowly regaining steering control. They are attempting to clear the channel." Aboard the USS Cole, Commander Hayes stepped out onto the port bridge wing. The heat of the morning hit her immediately. The smell of burning diesel fuel and salt hung heavy in the air. The massive civilian ship drifted past them. The gap between the gray warship and the black tanker was less than 200 meters. It was uncomfortably close, but it was safe. She picked up her radio. "Combat. This is the captain. Stand down from weapons free. Return to weapons hold. Tell the gun crews to keep their heads on a swivel but fingers off the triggers." 7:15 in the morning. The tension on the American weather decks began to break. The heavy machine gunners stood up slowly. Their muscles burned from the extreme adrenaline and the physical strain. They watched the massive civilian ship slide past their position. The narrow strait was finally opening up again. Inside the Iranian shore command bunker, the radar operators powered down the fire control systems. The mainland missile batteries returned to standby mode. The window for a coordinated ambush had closed. The tactical geometry was gone. The Strait of Hormuz was returning to its normal state of high-stress commercial traffic. The immediate crisis was over. But the strategic message had been delivered by both sides. Neither commander had backed down until the physical ocean forced them to. The morning sun climbed higher into the hazy sky. The water settled. The real analysis was about to begin. 7:20 in the morning. The massive black hull of the civilian supertanker finally cleared the path of the USS Cole. The gray warship had avoided a catastrophic collision by less than 200 meters. Commander Sarah Hayes stood on the starboard bridge wing. The heavy morning heat pressed down on her. The immediate danger was gone, but the strait was still hostile territory. She walked back into the air-conditioned bridge. "Helm, bring us back to base course. Speed 15 knots. The officer of the deck repeated the order. The massive gas turbine engines spun up smoothly. The ship settled back into its regular rhythm. Inside the dark combat center, the primary radar operator watched the digital screens. "Ma'am, surface contacts are reforming near the coastal shallows. Range is expanding. They are currently at 3,000 meters. The electronic warfare officer reported next. No active targeting emissions from the mainland. The coastal missile batteries remain in search mode only. Hayes nodded slowly. The spike of extreme escalation was over. The physical intervention of the civilian ship had shattered the tactical timeline. Neither side could legally or practically resume the engagement. The moment had passed. 7:25 in the morning. Near the rocky coast of Keshem Island, Captain Ali Reza brought his fast attack boat to a slow idle. His 4 wingmen formed up loosely behind him. The chaotic white water of the supertanker wake had finally flattened out. The adrenaline in his system was beginning to crash. His hands shook slightly on the metal steering wheel. He did not try to hide it. His heavy machine gunners sat back heavily against the fiberglass hull. They were all completely exhausted. Reza keyed his tactical radio. Swarm leader to base. We have reformed. All 5 units are operational. The American warship is proceeding on its original course. The shore base controller sounded much calmer than 10 minutes ago. Copy, leader. Command authorities have reviewed the situation. You are ordered to fall back to standard shadowing distance. Maintain a minimum of 4,000 meters. Do not cross their bow. Do not paint them with lasers. Observe and report only. Reza felt a profound sense of relief. He had pushed the Americans to the absolute limit. They had not flinched. Copy base. Moving to shadowing position. Reza pushed the throttle forward gently. The 5 boats moved out at a steady 20 knots. There was no more chaotic weaving. There was no more aggressive posturing. 7:30 in the morning. High above the strait, the Seahawk helicopter Guardian 1 maintained its overwatch pattern. The pilot looked down at the bright blue water. The massive gray shape of the destroyer cut a clean white wake. Far to the port side, the 5 Iranian speedboats trailed behind like tiny dark darts. The pilot pressed his transmit button. Combat Guardian 1. The fast boats are matching our speed. They are holding at 4,000 meters. No aggressive maneuvers. Inside the combat center, Hayes received the report. Copy Guardian 1. Stay on station for another 20 minutes, then return for recovery. She looked around the darkened room. The tactical action officer was wiping sweat from his forehead. The radar operators were leaning back slightly in their rigid chairs. The intense and suffocating pressure of the last hour was finally dissipating. They had stared down a coordinated ambush. They had navigated a near-fatal maritime disaster. They had not fired a single shot. Discipline had prevented a war. 7:35 in the morning. The USS Cole passed the narrowest point of the Strait of Hormuz. The waterway began to widen into the Gulf of Oman. The coastal mountains of the mainland slowly faded into the thick morning haze. The heavily armed Iranian speedboats remained visible on the surface search radar. They were no longer an active threat. They were simply an escort out of the territory. On the bridge, Hayes picked up the secure satellite telephone. It was time to call the 5th Fleet commander in Bahrain. The tactical phase was finished. The political phase was just beginning. 10 in the morning. The Gulf of Oman. The USS Cole reached the deep blue water of the open ocean. The jagged coastline of Iran disappeared completely behind the heavy sea haze. Commander Sarah Hayes stood on the starboard bridge wing. The air was still incredibly hot, but the suffocating tension of the narrow strait was finally gone. The crew was completely exhausted. They had stood at maximum readiness combat stations for 4 straight hours. They had come within 10 seconds of triggering a massive regional war. The heavy machine gunners were finally relieved of their posts. They secured their weapons and climbed down from the weather decks in total silence. Down in the darkened Combat Information Center, the primary radar screens showed normal commercial shipping lanes. The threat was far behind them. The ship sailed steadily toward the 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. 3 days later, Washington, D.C. Inside a secure briefing room at the Pentagon, naval intelligence officers reviewed the tactical data. A rear admiral watched the high-resolution thermal video recorded by the Seahawk helicopter. The silent footage showed the exact moment the civilian supertanker blocked the high-speed engagement. The briefing room was perfectly still. The analysts knew exactly how close the situation had been. If the tanker had not suffered a catastrophic steering casualty, the American destroyer would have opened fire with heavy weapons. The Iranian mainland batteries would have immediately launched a massive retaliatory anti-ship missile strike. The 5th Fleet would have been pulled into a full kinetic conflict. A senior intelligence analyst spoke quietly. They pushed our commander to the absolute edge. They wanted us to fire the first shot to justify a coastal defense response. Our discipline held, but we got incredibly lucky. The admiral nodded slowly. Luck is not a reliable maritime strategy. We need new rules of engagement for mainland coordinated swarm tactics. 3 days later, Tehran. At a heavily fortified coastal command bunker, Captain Ali Reza stood at rigid attention. A senior naval commander sat across a long wooden table. The commander reviewed the detailed after-action report. Reza kept his eyes fixed straight ahead. He had survived the high-speed attack run. He had brought all 5 of his tactical boats back intact. The commander finally looked up from the documents. The American warship did not panic. They did not activate their automated fire control systems until the absolute last moment. They are highly disciplined. Reza answered carefully and professionally. Yes, sir. I was inside 150 meters. I saw their gunners. They held their fire until we crossed the final lethal line. If the civilian oil tanker had not drifted into the channel, we would have lost the entire swarm. The commander closed the thick file. The strategic message was still delivered. We proved we can contest the strait at any moment. But we know their exact breaking point now. The strategic assessment remained grim. The Strait of Hormuz remained one of the most dangerous and vital waterways on Earth. Over 20% of the global oil supply pass through its narrow waters every single day. The massive gray warships of the United States Navy continued their freedom of navigation patrols. The heavily armed fast boats of the Iranian military continued to shadow them aggressively. Both sides possessed the absolute capability to inflict catastrophic damage. Both sides understood the unacceptable cost of actually doing so. Modern naval warfare in these tight geographic choke points is not decided by who has the most advanced radar systems. It is decided by who has the strongest nerves. Deterrence is a fragile and unpredictable concept. It relies entirely on professional human restraint under extreme psychological pressure. Sometimes it relies purely on a sudden mechanical failure aboard a passing civilian cargo ship. The invisible line between an uneasy peace and a devastating conflict is incredibly thin. On this specific morning, the line held. But the ocean is vast and unforgiving. The line will absolutely be tested again.